Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Spiro Circle. I wanted to do something a little bit different today. I wanted to talk about the topic of resilience and overcoming adversity and what that may do to one's mind, body, and soul. And I thought of no better person to speak to about this than Adir Freilich. He's a very old friend of mine. And I mean, I've known him a long time, not just that he's an old friend, but we go back many, many years. And we first met in Israel. And over the years that we've been friendly with each other, I've heard more and more of his stories about how he overcame some of the biggest challenges of his life. Adir, thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. And
So,
it's fun to circle back because we know each other because you worked with me on my podcast, the Startup Camel. So I'm glad that you've gone on to your own and spin off, no, not a spin off, but your own thing, which is great.
yeah, no, it's great. It's I like to think each one of these has been a little bit of a chapter over the years. We were doing that in 2017, and so now to be in 2025 and kind of doing this kind of thing, it just shows how many years have gone by and how it's all changed. But I wanted to focus on you today in the short time that we have. I mentioned that you had several times in your life that you faced big adversity and big challenges. You've had four experiences of facing death, and I would say probably facing death closer than most people get in their life. Talk me through those four moments briefly, and
Sure.
when they occurred in your life.
Well, the first three coincidentally happened on the seventh, so I joke around saying lucky seven. When I was seven, I was hit by a taxi, barely had a scratch on me. My brother and I were just running to a comic book store, flipped up in the air, really crazy, but we obviously made it through. My brother had a little bit of a bloody knee, not a scratch on me. 10 years later, when I was 17, my appendix burst. And, I barely had a pain, but I went to just make sure everything was okay. And that happens a lot. And the doctor did a little x-ray and said, we're just going to go in just to be safe. 3.5 hours of surgery, massive scar across my stomach, was very close to death. And then when I was 27 was kind of the more famous one, which is that I was in the plane that crashed in the Hudson River, the Miracle on the Hudson, the Sully plane, where they've made a movie about it, which is completely inaccurate. The guy sitting in my seat has a full head of hair. It's such Hollywood BS. But actually, besides that, it's pretty accurate. The movie, if you haven't seen it, it's pretty great. And that was a very close to death one since it was a plane crash. And then after that, I joked saying, I have another 10 years. When I'm 37, I'll either get a heart attack or get cancer, joking around. And lo and behold, just shy of 37, when I was 36 in June of 2018, I was diagnosed with a fourth stage cancer, a Burkitt's lymphoma. In that moment, it was a very scary moment. And I'm a human being, even though I felt like I can't be killed in a way, joking, hearing cancer is a scary word. And I had a moment of being a human being where I was a bit emotional and felt like, wow, I could die. And then I took a deep breath and I said, you know what? This is a shitty situation that I know I will get through. And throughout that last near death experience, the doctors and the nurses, they didn't even know how to deal with me. I would say, I'm the luckiest person in the world. And they would say, but you're getting chemotherapy. And I would say, but I'm going to survive. And I
Yeah, I
think
was just in a plane
mentality,
crash. Yeah.
yeah, man, literally, uh, you know, when people would walk in, the nurses or doctors, I joke saying I'm your luckiest patient, and they kind of chuckle. And a lot of times towards the end, they had already heard about me being in the plane crash in the Hudson and my optimism and my attitude. And I do truly believe that on multiple levels, because of being optimistic and happy, I survived and thrived. Honestly, I'm in the best shape of my life now, although I'm not in such great shape. But compared to dying of cancer or being overweight in the past, now I have a healthy mentality. Um, and the doctors and the nurses, they walked in and I was just a cheery type of person. And I think that a lot of people going through cancer, chemotherapy is very painful. I did have times where I was suffering through the medications and everything. But the truth is, I was still an easy person to be around. I wasn't really suffering outside, just internally. And I think, that could be just the way our minds work, pushing through and working with the medicine, knowing everything's going to be okay. It could be being a cheery person, having doctors and nurses want to take better care of you. I had a lot of friends and family come and visit me during that time because I do have a lot of friends and family. And I was open with people about it, and people came and they were there for me. And, I think it all plays a role in pushing through the hardest possible thing imaginable.
Well, no, I mean it's amazing, and you know, it's amazing that you've overcome so many challenges in so many different areas. It's like one of them is a major health scare, the other one is a large traffic incident.
Yeah,
The other one is a medical emergency. You've kind of had it all. It's kind of like a you're the star in the Final Destination franchise. You're the
right, right.
actor they just keep bringing back for all of
Yeah.
those movies. What does that do to your mindset in terms of fear or anxiety? How do you look at the life? Do you have any fear or anxiety? Do you not? What is that? What does that
Sure,
do? What does
sure.
that do to you?
It has caused me to be somewhat fearless and not really think, that negatively, because I just have looked at a terrible situation on multiple occasions of my life and said, and survived them. Getting through them is one thing. Being at the other end of them, when I was going through the cancer treatment, for example, I knew I was going to be okay. And I always joked long before I had cancer. One of my things I like to say is I could see the light at the end of the deepest and darkest tunnels. And I think that when you have that ability to see the end in any journey in life, not just to overcome some crazy event in life, if you're looking for a job, you got to envision it, you got to know it's there, you got to see, and it makes the journey to get to that goal more fun, knowing things will be positive. Right now, my wife and I are looking for a house. We've been looking for 2 years, actually, which could be annoying. And 2 years ago, when my wife was concerned about what our house situation was going to be, and we don't know where is it going to be, all these questions about it's complicated and the pricing, blah, blah, blah. I said to her, joking around, I said, who knows? It could be a month, 3 months, 6 months from now, we're going to be in a house of our dreams, and we're going to be so happy, and we're going to look back and laugh that we worried about it. Meanwhile, we're 2 years later, long past 6 months, and we're not happy in our new dream home. But it just hasn't been meant to be. And the journey to there is okay. And every time a house doesn't work out, it's usually because of my wife. And she looks at me, she's like, "Are you mad at me? Are you okay?" I'm like, "It's not meant to be, you know?"
You're never mad. You're never. That's what I've learned. That's what I've learned over the years. You're never mad. Um,
Not meant to be, we move forward, and that's the thing. You go with the flow. Going with the flow, I think, makes a lot of the process of going through harder times much easier. Accepting and looking forward and knowing things are going to work out, it just makes everything easier to deal with.
so, what part does optimism play in your recoveries, whether mental, emotional, or physical, but also in your day-to-day outlook? Because as you said, you're mentioning a lot of optimism in how you approach fear or or lack thereof, and some of the challenges that come your way. What role does it play exactly?
You know, my optimism is especially tested with my wife. She's amazing, my wife, but she's just not an optimist. And when you're dealing with people who are not optimists, they're constantly forcing challenges in your face. And I actually need to practice a little more empathy with my wife, because even though I know things are always going to work out, because she doesn't know that, I don't like to necessarily dismiss or laugh it off, which is what I tend to do with almost any problem. But with my wife, I've actually had to pull that back a tiny bit and kind of just help her through the process of understanding, okay, there could be some negative stuff, but we're going to be okay. And we have to realize, I like to remind my wife who she's married to every once in a while when we get into these little frictional negative moments, and like everything's going to work out. And she just like feels like I'm too lackadaisical, but I guess in a way we're a good balance. You have to be a little bit of a realist, and you don't want to be on cloud nine and la la land, like, oh, everything's going to work out, but to me, it really does feel that way all the time.
No,
So
you sound like
optimism
the
for
perfect
me,
balance.
yeah, no, it works out well, my wife and I, because she's much more of the realist. But I think that at the end of the day, it's just about in practice in your life. You can't just sit there going la la la, nothing's wrong. When things come up, though, to me, I don't spend that much time worrying or being anxious or getting uncomfortable or frustrated. When a problem comes, there's going to be human emotions that play a role, but then I get to pull myself back and look at the situation and analyze it and make decisions based on what I think I need to do, where I need to go in order to get to the result, a positive result. And I see it, and sometimes I have to work a little harder. Sometimes it's just naturally positive. I people come to problems and they just give up sometimes. I mean, something as simple as my father-in-law couldn't figure out how to open a screen door from my daughter's pool lesson. And he literally just goes, can't figure it out, sits down. I will literally sit there, and that doesn't take me long because I know there's a solution. Obviously, I know I'm not locked in. So I just go open the door easily. And this is just like the way I approach all of life. Like I know there's a solution to every problem. And the woman's version of that is there's a problem to every solution, But at the end of the day, no.
I'm
At
not
the end of
possibly
the
commenting.
day,
I don't
you
want to
know,
get in trouble.
it's fair. I think that it is just important as far as accomplishing things to just stay optimistic because an optimistic mindset and mentality doesn't get in the way of productivity. An emotional, frustrated, annoyed, when you get into these emotional, negative emotions, it blocks your rational thinking part of your brain. It's a psychological thing, I'm sure. I mean, and this is what we're talking about here, psychological aspect of things. I think it's as simple as your mind works better when you're in a positive mental attitude, period. If your mind is in a positive state, you're able to be more productive and see things clearer. When your mind is in a negative state where you're like, why me mentality or frustrated or annoyed, I could be frustrated. The housing market's gone so weird. It's so expensive. I don't want to overpay. Or I could just say, the housing market's in a weird place and it's not time for me. And I think that in every aspect of things, it's like there's a good and a bad part in theory in your mind. And so you can analyze it. And if you think about the negative, it'll keep you just in a negative place. You think about the positive, more positive things will happen. I believe because I'm positive, positive things happen to me. I meet people in a positive way, the way I met you, even. And I think that it just gives me a little bit of a leg up on the average person where I'm not wasting time worrying or being concerned and stuff like that.
Do you believe in fate or luck or
I
destiny?
joke saying I'm the luckiest person in the world, and my wife really doesn't like me saying that because she feels like I'm bragging because not everybody's so lucky. I think that it's a combo. I think I make luck. And also, it's also how you look at things. My father-in-law, for example, who's a pessimist, and that's who raised my wife. He thinks I'm unlucky because most people's planes don't crash and most people don't get cancer. And that's a
But most
negative way
people
of
don't walk
looking.
away from plane crashes.
That's true. And
Yeah.
you and I could be optimistic and think that way, but most people don't get into that one to begin with. So maybe I'm unlucky because I was in a crash. I mean, that's the thing. It's all about the way you look at things. So I think that, my life has had a lot of luck. I'm very fortunate and lucky and blessed, or whatever angle you want to use, to be alive on multiple occasions. The world has come close to taking me away, but I'm thankful that I'm alive and well.
If you
So
could go, so am I. If you could go back
thank you.
and change anything about those incidents, would you?
Uh, you know, maybe I would have taken my phone with me on the plane and taken some more pictures, but besides that, nah, I wouldn't change a thing because this is what made me. This is the experiences of life. Nothing beats experiences, and I've had such unique ones, especially where they're famous, like a plane crash in the Hudson. It's a very famous event to be part of. And I just feel lucky to have been part of it and to have survived it. And especially like, look, in other plane crashes, not only do most people die, if there's people who live, they have survivor's guilt. In my plane crash, the luckiness is not just that I survived, it's that everyone survived on my plane. It's considered a miracle because no one died. In the history of aviation, there was never before a plane that crashed into a body of water with no death. Since that day, it has not happened again. So, I do feel very lucky. And I feel like, maybe the people on the plane should feel lucky that I was on the plane because I think maybe that's why I survived. No, I'm just kidding. But either way, I am just a fortunate, lucky guy. I do believe in luck. I'm not so sure I believe in fate, but I go with the flow.
For the audience who are watching or listening, Adir was on the plane crash that the movie that we mentioned at the start of this episode. It was popularized. Tom Hanks was the actor who played him, right? Sully.
Correct. Sully. Yep.
And you met him afterwards, is that right?
I did not meet Tom Hanks, but I did meet Sully one
No, I
year
meant I
later.
meant Sully. Yeah, right. Yeah, more
I
of the
met
hero,
Sully a year
bigger
later. We
hero.
did an anniversary, the 1 year anniversary, and they did a little event. So I got to meet him and I handed him a letter and the co-pilot as well, Jeff Skiles. And then also they did a couple Zoom reunions when COVID was hardcore. This year they had it again, and I was considering, but I didn't really want to leave my family. I don't care enough to chase the reunions. They're fun and it's nice to see other survivors of the plane and hear how their lives are going. But I'm really I've actually felt that it was an experience of my own and I keep it with myself and I share it with people and I share it with people in my life, but I don't feel the need to like go to these reunions and stuff. They're fun though, I'm sure.
Out of all of the ways that you have had to recover, whether it's physically or emotionally or mentally, which one was the most challenging for you to face?
It has to be the cancer one because to put it simply, I mean, it really took a lot out of me. And I have some, pictures and videos and stuff from when I was going through it. I really lost a lot of weight. And the medicine's very heavy on your body. You lose your appetite, you lose a lot of strength and I was weaker and it was just killing me basically. And then, the bounce back it took a little bit of time before my immune system was back in place. So I couldn't go out to restaurants and it was very intense time. But then as soon as I got the clearance to go eat sushi, for example, I went crazy. So although it was a hard road to recovery, once I got the green light where I was free, I was meeting different friends. And keep in mind, this is a time where I was kind of semi-retired. I wasn't really working or doing anything. So I survived this cancer. It could have disrupted my life. It's another luck. I didn't have a job that it was disrupting necessarily. I was working on the podcast, but that was a fun thing for me and it didn't disrupt my life and I got through and then as soon as I was recovered I was just having so much fun and I was so happy to be alive. So while it was the hardest thing to go through, it does like the cliche and I believe in it, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It really did, and it made me appreciate my life a different way. Each individual unique life or death thing, it kind of molds me. All your experiences mold you, but after the plane crash I felt like nothing's impossible. I can do anything I want in life. And I really traveled and I enjoyed my life like never before. And I've been on hundreds of planes since the crash. But it didn't teach me anything about health. Having a health scare like cancer opened my eyes to eating healthy, and it just changed my mentality of health and exercise. And that's a different part of me that molded another part. So now I'm optimistic, I'm healthy. My wife really has strict rules on what we give our daughter, for example, and also what I eat. She's really on top of me. She gets on my case. But in general, it's important to take care of your health. You don't realize it when you're young. As you get older, you start to have a little pain here and ache there, and it starts to wake you up. But I'm a human being. I'm getting older, and now I try to be conscious of what I put into my body. I think the body is, you know, the body and the soul are all connected in how you eat.
It's the greatest instrument you'll ever own.
Yeah.
Can we clarify what kind of cancer you had and
So I
what
had
that
something
journey
called
was?
Burkitt's lymphoma. I found out through a random blood test. A friend of mine, he's a doctor as well. He's a psychiatrist. One of my closest friends, Dr. Matthew Lorber. I went to him and I said to him, I have a little loss of feeling here in my face. And he said it could be stress related. At the time, my mom had actually gone through another cancer earlier in the year, and my grandmother was turning 95, not far from then. And she was sick. And so he said it could be stress related, but just to be safe, come into my office. Let me have a look at you. And I showed him, and it was a little loss of feeling here. He said, it's called the mental nerve. It wraps around here. Just to be safe, we'll do some blood work. And similarly to the appendix bursting, they did just some checkups just to be safe, and they discovered something extravagant, and right to the emergency room. I was checked for everything possible. I did a PET scan, a CAT scan. My favorite one was the bone marrow biopsy, which they literally take a corkscrew and go into your bone, into your hip. Not fun.
Mm. Sounds
Lots
more
of
painful
needles,
than the plane
lots of
crash.
blood. Yeah, lots of blood taken. And then I met my oncologist not long after. This is 10 days. I went from being totally healthy to being diagnosed with a fourth stage cancer. I met my oncologist and I said, hi, nice to meet you. She said, go right to chemotherapy. And 5 days of chemotherapy in a row, that changed everything in my whole life immediately. And then I was on a very intense regimen of medications and chemo and back and forth and doctors and taxis. And I was wearing a mask before masks were cool for COVID, And it's like my immune system was compromised. And it was just a very, very intense period of my life. And, I vividly remember a lot of it. Just accepting the reality and knowing that I was going to be okay, pushing through. So it was a very annoying and very painful process. At one point, my wife was really trying to get on my case, trying to make sure I was being healthy because I was supposed to walk around and get circulation. And,
Well, she
she
wasn't your
told,
wife then, right? That's the
no,
story.
she wasn't. She was my girlfriend at the time.
Yeah. Okay. Just so that the viewers have a
Yeah.
historical timeline of what was happening.
Well, I joke saying I had to move across the world and get cancer to get convince my wife to marry me. But even after my last chemo, when she knew I was okay, I said, "Okay, let's get married. Let's start our family." And she said, "No, no, I'm not ready." She wasn't ready. She went off and took a little trip. I traveled the world a little bit, and it took a little more time to convince her before before I locked her in. But yeah, when I was going through
She
it,
was
she
probably
was,
scared about what was going to happen if
yeah,
she
she was scared.
if she didn't
Yeah.
say yes.
It's true. Yeah, no, she was a bit scared. It's a scary moments um to be diagnosed with a cancer, but
And you're all in the clear
sat
now,
there
right?
through.
You're in remission.
Yeah, I'm in remission. Well, supposedly 1 year after the cancer was cured or out of me, I had a 20% chance of recurrence. 2 years, no chance of recurrence for this specific cancer. So I'm in good health and I get checked out, of course. You never know, but I'm feeling good these
No,
days.
that's amazing. It's amazing. What congratulations for overcoming the adversity and all the things you faced. What are some of the lessons or advice you would give others who may find themselves in an adversarial position, not necessarily cancer or plane crashes, but anything,
Sure.
anyone who's in a stage where they face resilience
Sure.
or
I mean,
adversity?
I think that, you know, the optimistic mentality is always going to win over. If you can get that into your mind that things are going to be okay. Sometimes it's very hard to understand how something is going to work out, but approaching it where there is a way and you just need to find it, it's going to clear your mind in a way to give you the space to really find it. Being optimistic and knowing anything is possible, to me, it's very easy for me to trigger it because of my survivals. When I hear from someone that something is impossible, I say, but I was in a plane that crashed into a body of water and nobody died. So why can't I change something on my sandwich? It's like some people live in a little box, right? And I live in like outer space somewhere over here. And I'm just kind of a mover and a shaker, get things done because I have this mentality where I can just persevere and push through and know that I can get things done. When you have this concept of hitting a wall where you need to overcome some sort of adversity, you need to just be able to know that there's something at the end and that will let you get there faster. Simple.
Wonderful. I know that there's a very trendy like slogan online at the moment where it's kind of like you really can just do anything, like you really can just do what you want.
Right.
And it sounds like a lot of that YOLO carpe diem mentality is what gets people so successful in achieving
Sure.
crossing those barriers.
I think that another thing is that we as human beings make all these assumptions and plans and think what's best for us. And, all these things are in our mind. So if we fall short of them, maybe we're disappointed. But, it's very hard to plan your journey and to really know what you really want at the end. You can have an idea, but when I planned my life, it didn't go anywhere close to the way my life has turned out. And, being a stay-at-home father, for example, that's a very unique and rare thing. Nowadays, there's two-income households everywhere you look. I go to parent and me or mommy and me classes all the time, and there's babysitters there because both parents have to work. So, I am very fortunate for that as well. And I would have never planned my life this way, but I feel very fortunate and lucky for it to be this way. And my daughter's having a unique upbringing because of that. Now my wife's trying to take her away from me and put her in school, but I'm trying to fight that. We'll see.
I think
But
she doesn't have much of a choice, unfortunately. Just for everyone
eventually,
everyone who's at home, how talk to us about your daughter. How old is she?
she is going to be 3 on March 12th, so she's almost a month out from her third birthday. And that's another thing, by the way. When I was sick, I was told because I was going through chemotherapy, there's a good chance I will not be able to reproduce. And that was a devastating piece of information for me because I really love children and I really wanted to have many. But even that, although that was devastating for me to hear, I just compartmentalized and I said, you know what, I'll cross that road when I get to it. And even when my wife and I were trying for uh, our daughter, I was thinking to go get a test to see what's going on with me. Am I going to be okay? But I said, let's just try. And lo and behold, first try, boom, pregnant. So, and our daughter is, thank God, healthy. She's bright. She's a lot of fun, and it's an amazing thing having children. I feel like it's exciting. It's an exciting thing that when you go through it, you'll get it, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. And for those who may not know, I had dinner with Adir and his absolutely lovely family in Florida just a few months ago, and it was lovely. It was a lovely time. You have a lovely family, and to overcome all of the adversity that you had, and to remain resilient and optimistic in all those
No,
uh,
thanks.
instances is real inspiration, which is why I wanted to speak to you today. I don't want to ask what's going to come up the next time you turn to a digit of seven in of your
I
age.
don't talk about it like I joked in the past because I don't want to manifest anything too crazy, but I'm sure I'll be okay either way.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to. Yeah, I'm not going to comment on anything, and I certainly wouldn't want you to manifest anything. But Adair, I have no doubt that you're going to be a-okay. Thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your story. It really is
Thank
inspiring,
you
and I
for
really
having me
hope,
on, and thank you for your time.
yeah, I really hope people gain something from this, and we'll keep in touch. Ciao. Thank you.
Feel free to add any of my personal information, my IG or my Gmail or anything you'd like. If anybody of your audience would like to contact me just for a question, an inspirational thought, or conversation, I'm pretty free I'm happy to help out with anything and anyone. So
Okay, that's wonderful. I'll make sure to put it on the screen and in the information.
cool.
Adair, thank you so much.
Always a pleasure, Spyro. I hope to see you again soon, whether Israel, New York, Florida. Let me know.
Definitely Florida. All right, see you soon.
All right, buddy. Talk to
Bye.
you. Bye, bye.